Caleb always said that Elena saw the world differently than anyone else. She didn't see trees, she saw textures. He turned his back for less than 2 minutes. When he turned around, the easel was there. The paints were open, but Elena was gone. The only thing left was the wind, whispering through the pines, carrying a secret it would keep for 20 years. The Great Smoky Mountains have a way of holding on to time, keeping it trapped beneath the canopy of ancient spruce and fir trees, like a secret history that no one is allowed to read. For Caleb and Elena, this trip was supposed to be a celebration of time. Caleb was an architect by trade, a man of rigid lines and structures, someone who found comfort in things that could be measured, calculated, and built with certainty. Elena was his complete opposite, a watercolor artist who thrived in the abstract, finding beauty in the way colors bled together and boundaries disappeared into the unknown. They chose the Tennessee side of the mountains, specifically the area near Clingman's Dome, the highest point where the earth seems to touch the sky and the air feels thin and holy. It was mid-October, and the Appalachians were on fire with color, a burning sea of crimson maples, golden hickories, and Dian orange oaks that stretched as far as the eye could see. They parked their car at a quiet trailhead, far away from the tourists crowding the observation tower, seeking a private moment in the wild to reconnect with the silence. Elena carried her travel easel and a leather satchel filled with brushes, while Caleb carried the supplies, the water, and the heavy coats to protect them from the mountain chill. "The light is perfect today, Cal," she had said, her eyes reflecting the deep, endless green of the forest that surrounded them like a living embrace. He remembered the way the sun caught the stray hairs escaping her braid, turning them into a halo of copper and gold that seemed to glow against the shadows. They hiked for 2 hours, moving deeper into the woods, the air growing thinner and cooler as they ascended toward the ridgeline. The trail was narrow, carpeted with soft needles and damp moss that muffled their footsteps. It was a breathtaking view, the kind that made human problems feel insignificant, a place where the world felt ancient and untouched by the grief that plagues the cities below. The weather in the high country is a fickle beast, capable of changing from bright sunshine to oppressive gray in the span of a single heartbeat, catching hikers off guard, bringing with it a sudden drop in temperature and the heavy, metallic smell of impending rain. "I left the mixing rag in the car," she realized, patting her pockets with a frown, her artistic flow suddenly interrupted by the missing tool she desperately needed. The car was 2 miles back, a trek that didn't make sense. "It's maybe 5 minutes back." "I'll run and grab it," Caleb offered, standing up, not realizing that this moment was the hinge upon which their entire lives would turn. "You're the best. Hurry back before the fog eats the view," she said, turning back to her canvas, her brush poised to strike the paper. Those were the last words she ever spoke to him. Hurry back before the fog eats the view, a playful warning that would become a haunting curse. He found the piece of fabric exactly where he remembered, a dirty hiker's towel dropped by someone days before, but he knew it would serve the purpose. It wasn't just fog, it was a wall of white, a cloud grounding itself on the mountain, erasing the trees and the sky with a terrifying, silent speed. He quickened his pace, a sudden, irrational spike of adrenaline hitting his chest as the woods went unnaturally silent around him. No bird sang, the wind had died, and the only sound was the blood rushing in his ears and the snap of twigs under his boots. He reached the clearing in less than 6 minutes, his breath coming in short gasps, expecting to see Elena packing up her gear to escape the dampness. Elena, a cadet, expecting her to step from behind the tree, perhaps seeking shelter from the damp air or playing a game to scare him. Silence answered him. Caleb checked his watch. 20 minutes had passed since he returned to the clearing, and she couldn't have gone far without her gear. He pulled out his phone, praying for a bar of service, but the SOS icon mocked him from the top corner of the screen. He forced himself to stop running aimlessly. Think, Caleb. Think. Panic is the enemy in the wild. She probably wandered off trail to find a restroom spot and got turned around. 3 sharp blasts that cut through the mist. Peep, peep, peep. He waited. Night falls quickly in the mountains, especially when the clouds choke out the sun, turning the gray mist into a suffocating charcoal darkness. He realized he had to go down to get help, but leaving the spot felt like abandoning her, like tearing off his own limb. He stumbled down the trail in the dark, using his phone flashlight, tripping over roots, and sobbing uncontrollably as the reality of the situation began to set in. But he drove to the nearest ranger station with reckless desperation, knowing the Smokies and knowing exactly what the cold did to people who weren't prepared. Caleb watched from the hood of his car, shivering not from the cold, but from the shock, his mind unable to process that this was actually happening, looking like an army preparing for war against the wilderness itself. But it just dots. Like she evaporated into the air. Why did he have to be so helpful when all she needed was him? The search continued for 3 agonizing days, with helicopters chopping the air above the canopy, their noise vibrating in Caleb's chest like a second heartbeat. Hundreds of people combed the woods, shoulder to shoulder, poking trekking poles into the thick brush and calling her name until their voices were hoarse. But the Smoky Mountains are vast, comprised of deep ravines, hidden caves, and dense rhododendron hells that have never seen the light of day. On the 4th day, a heavy storm rolled in, grounding the helicopters and making the terrain too dangerous for the searchers to continue safely. Caleb sat in the ranger station, staring at a topographical map on the wall, tracing the contour lines with his eyes until they blurred together. He felt her out there, could feel her cold and her fear in his own bones, and he whispered to her in his mind, begging her to hold on. But the mountains were silent, indifferent to his pain, keeping their secrets buried under layers of moss and stone. The search was officially suspended after 10 days. The terminology shifting from rescue to recovery, a linguistic change that broke Caleb's heart. He didn't go home. He couldn't go back to the house they had bought together, to the empty studio, filled with her unfinished art and the smell of her perfume. He rented a small, drafty cabin in Gatlinburg, staring out the window at the mountains that had taken her, hating them and yet needing to be near them. He became a ghost in the town, a man who grew a beard, lost weight, and spent his days hiking the same trails over and over again. He bought his own maps and marked every cave, every hollow, every ridge line within a 5-mile radius of the clearing where she vanished. Winter came, turning the mountains into a fortress of ice and snow, the white landscape mocking him by hiding everything under a blanket of silence. His friends called, begging him to come home, telling him, "Caleb, you have to eat. You have to work." Elena wouldn't want this for you. But they didn't understand that leaving meant accepting she was gone, and leaving meant breaking the promise to never leave her side. Nights were the hardest. In the silence of the cabin, he would hallucinate her voice calling him from the other room, sounding so real, it stopped his heart. He would wake up reaching for her, his hand grasping cold sheets, the reality crashing down on him like a physical blow that knocked the wind out of him. He replayed their wedding vows in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, and felt he had failed the most basic protectiveness of a husband. A year passed, then 2, and the missing person flyers in the town windows began to fade, sun-bleached and curling at the edges, ignored by tourists came and went, snapping photos of the beautiful views, oblivious to the tragedy that lay hidden in the deep woods they admired. Caleb eventually had to return to work, but he was a hollow shell of the man he used to be, going through the motions of life without actually living. He kept a phone line active, paying the bill every month, just in case she turned it on, just in case a miracle happened. Every anniversary, he returned to the clearing. Sitting by the rock, where she had set her easel, talking to the empty air as if she were still there. He told her about the world, about the gray hairs he was getting, about how much he missed the smell of her turpentine and lavender soap. He became a sad man of the mountain too, the locales, a tragic fixture of the park, a living warning to others to never let go of the ones they love. 5 years turned into 10, and the sharp edge of grief dulled into a heavy, constant etch, a stone he carried in his pocket every single day. He started to wonder if he was crazy, if she had ever really been there, or if she was just a beautiful dream he had once had. But then he would look at her paintings, the ones hanging in his hallway, and remember the light in her eyes, confirming that the love was real. It was the 12th year when the mountain finally decided to give something back, though it wasn't what Caleb had prayed for. A particularly dry summer had caused the undergrowth to die back, revealing parts of the forest floor that were usually hidden by thick ferns. A group of off-trail hikers, young and adventurous, were scrambling up a steep, rocky incline 2 miles north of the original search zone, far from where anyone thought she could be. One of them slipped and grabbed onto an old, hollowed-out chestnut log to break his fall, and the rotting wood crumbled under his weight. Inside, wrapped tightly in 3 layers of heavy-duty plastic bags, was a rectangular object that had been shoved deep into the wood for protection. The hikers brought it to the ranger station, and Officer Holloway, now gray-haired and nearing retirement, called Caleb immediately with a shaking voice. Caleb drove the 4 hours to the station, his hands trembling on the steering wheel, his heart pounding a rhythm of dread and hope that made him nauseous. He sat in the office as Holloway placed the object on the desk. It was her sketchbook, the leather cover moldy but miraculously intact. Caleb's hands shook uncontrollably as he peeled back the plastic, the smell of the forest-old earth and decay wafting up from the preserved pages. The paper was damp but legible, and he turned the pages, tears streaming down his face as he saw her handwriting and her sketches. The first few pages were the ones she did that day. The view from the clearing, a quick sketch of him sitting on the rock, looking happy. But then the pages changed, and there were entries from after the fog had swallowed her, proving she had survived the initial disappearance. Day 1. Fog too thick. Walked right, then left. Can't find the trail. Heard you screaming, Caleb screamed back. You didn't hear me, Caleb sobbed, a guttural sound that seemed to tear his chest apart, realizing how close he had been to her without knowing. Day 3. Cold. So cold. Hurt my ankle. Can't walk. I found a hollow tree. I'm going to wait here. You'll find me. He turned the pages, reading the documentation of her slow fading. The fear, the hunger, and then the acceptance of her fate. The handwriting became shaky, barely a scrawl, as she wrote, "The mountains are beautiful, even when they are killing you." And then the final page was not words, but a drawing, a final testament to her enduring love. It was a sketch of a man, seen from behind, walking into the light. Strong and alive it was Caleb. Underneath, in faint pencil, she had written, "Do not let the darkness take you too, my love. Live for both of us." They never found her body. The woods had claimed her completely, returning her to the earth she loved to paint, leaving only her art behind. Caleb is an old man now, walking with a cane, his steps slow and measured on the paved path up to Klingman's dome. He doesn't go into the deep woods anymore. He doesn't need to, because he knows she is everywhere around him. He stands at the railing, looking out over the endless sea of blue ridges, the mist swirling like a living thing in the valleys below. He takes a copy of that final drawing from his pocket, the paper soft from years of handling, but he doesn't cry anymore. He feels a peace now, a strange, quiet connection, knowing that when the fog rolls in, She is close. He understands now that the mountains are not evil. They are simply vast, indifferent, and incredibly deep containers of secrets. He whispers into the wind, "I lived, Elena. I lived for both of us. But I am ready to see the view you see now." He imagines her standing just beyond the tree line, her easel set up, painting the colors of eternity that no living eye can see. As he turns to leave, the wind picks up, rustling the spruce trees, and for a split second, it sounds like a whisper. "I'm still here, in the heart of Appalachia, where the mist never truly lifts. Love is the only thing that cannot be lost." The story of Caleb and Elena is a reminder to hold your loved ones tight, to never take a moment for granted, because in the wilderness and in life, the weather can change in a heartbeat, and the silence can last forever.